we are pleased to present our latest work to you. A device for presence detection based on LD2410 and ESP32. The board was developed by Giovanni Castagna. It hosts an LD2410, a brightness sensor and several in-outs to allow the user maximum expandability. After a few months of development and testing, our team has published a custom card on hacks to facilitate the configuration of the device in Home Assistant and for the setup of the LD2410. The development work also led to a notable reduction in the entities created by EspHome. In the original version, it creates around 70 entities for managing the device. Our firmware reduces created entities by 20%. Furthermore, 3 subzones have been implemented that you can use for your automations. Card configuration. Search for the LD2410 card. The editor will search for all LD devices in your Home Assistant and generate a list. The card will be configured with the first LD in the list. In this case, it is a test device that is currently not available. I delete the device and go to look for the device to configure. Once you have selected the device, press the plus button to add it to the device list. The card can work with one or more devices, based on your configuration. Here you can edit the name that will appear on the card. In the list of devices, the one just configured will no longer be visible and only the available ones will be shown. If you configure more than one device, a drop-down menu will appear on the card from which you can choose the device to configure. As seen, the card allows easy configuration of the device via a graphic editor. YAML configuration is equally easy. Just 2 lines of code to configure more than 70 entities for the stock version of the integration and more than 50 for our firmware. We just used a trick to get to this. Everything works as long as the entity names are not changed. However, you can change the various friendly names as you wish. There are 2 buttons, one will take you to our firmware, the other to the store where you can buy our device. The project is open source, nothing is binding, but if you buy our device or make a donation, you will help us in the development of the project. Thank you. This is what the card looks like. At the top left we find the presence indicator. Green free, red presence. Clicking on it takes you to more info. Here we can select the device to configure. I remind you that the drop-down menu will only appear if 2 or more devices have been configured. In this section you can set the timeout, i.e. how long after the presence sensor turns off after the last detection. To its right we find out pin, i.e. the state of the physical output of the LD. Distance tells you how far away the person detected by the LD is. Move is the amount of movement of the detected subject and still is the amount of presence. Lux is the brightness value detected by the sensor added by Giovanni. I remind you that LD2410 is equipped with a brightness sensor, but transmits data only in engineering mode. This is the graphical representation of the detection. Indicates the detection distance in the set scale. The scale adapts to the number of activated gates. This section displays the 3 additional zones. These zones are quick to configure and you can use the related binary sensors for your automations. The slider is displayed only if the relative entities are configured in the EspHome firmware. In our device they are available by default. This is the options screen. Here you can configure the communication baud rate. You can set the default state of the out pin. This part of brightness configuration concerns the sensor integrated into the LD. The current integration allows it to be used only in engineering mode, which makes it, at the moment, useless. We hope that in an integration development, it can be used without activating engineering mode. Resolution is one of the most important parts of the configuration. It defines the resolution of the sensor. Allows you to set the gate width to 20 centimeters or 75 centimeters. This element definitely changes the working range of the LD. By setting it to 20 centimeters and activating all 8 available zones, the sensor will work up to 1.6 meters. By setting it to 75 centimeters, the working range reaches up to 6 meters. In this section you can restart the ESP, restart the LD, do a factory reset of all parameters, and request the parameters from the LD. In certain conditions, it may happen that entities do not have data. By clicking on Query Params, the ESP will transmit all the necessary data to Home Assistant. In this section you can set the sensitivity of your device. The LD divides the space in front of him into 8 gates. You can deactivate the gates that do not interest you to reduce the detection range. If you have a 4-meter room, it is useless to use all 8 gates and carry out the detection up to 6 meters. Indeed, this practice is decidedly harmful to a correct reading of the presence. By moving the slider you set the number of gates and the scale on the presence graph. You should note that every time you change the number of gates, the LD2410 will reboot. There will be a few seconds where data is not transmitted. The graph is made up of sliders. Move and still work in OR, so, if the red area of a zone, of move, or still, exceeds the purple line, presence will be detected. In the upper part of the slider 2 values are displayed. One shows the instantaneous percentage, the other the threshold beyond which the sensor goes into presence. The board has a round shape and is contained in a specially designed case. You can also purchase the wall support to better orient the LD2410. Internal or external mounting. The device has a USB-C connector, a connector for LD2410C. A new board is in production to support the LD2420. There are 2 additional I2C connectors. They have mirrored wiring. The user has the possibility of inserting additional sensors or expansion modules. You can find some I2C modules and their related code on the GitHub page to insert into your EspHome project.